I have been on implementations for ATSs where recruiters have not been consulted until UAT. Get to user acceptance testing. Hey guys, we have a new ATS. Come try it out. Didn't consider talking to them sooner when you were trying to figure out your processes, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to build these different modules. And you wonder why they're like not following the click path that you were expecting. Like why they're not using the tracking steps that you developed. You know, why they're not clicking through and sending email templates the way you expected them to. Like, what's wrong with them? That's often a line that you see in this space. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with them. You just didn't ask them what they wanted.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to System Admin Insights. This is a podcast where we get to know the frontline system administrators who make HR technology work. These are the folks who implement, configure, and maintain HR software so that companies get the most bang for their HR technology buck. Today, I am very excited to have Adam Treitler joining me. Adam is a seasoned HR technology strategist who has led major initiatives at industry giants like Twitter and Viacom CBS. With a fascinating background spanning areas like AI, automation, user experience design, and HR process transformation, Adam brings a truly unique and multidisciplinary perspective to his work. In this conversation, we'll tap into Adam's wealth of experience to explore some of the biggest opportunities and challenges in HR tech today, from using data to improve talent acquisition, to designing digital employee experiences, to striking the right balance between human and machine intelligence. We'll cover a lot of ground. So, without further ado, let's welcome Adam Treitler to the show. Hi, Adam.
Thank you, Alex.
So, as an experienced HR technology strategist, what do you see as the biggest challenges organizations face when trying to implement and integrate new HR tech solutions, and how can they overcome those hurdles?
I think the biggest challenge that I see is really just misalignment on purpose and misalignment on objectives. There's lots of microcosms and pieces within that. And you could argue, it's not having the right people in the room, not always having the most informed decisions being made, right? But it really is a misalignment on purpose, right? You have senior leaders who are often making these decisions around HR technology heavily influenced by dollars. And that makes total sense, right? Companies run on money. You need to put money towards selecting technology, and you also need to have some money left over for other things like people's salaries. So, it's a complicated decision. It's an important decision. Oftentimes, lower level practitioners are not involved in that decision. And it makes some sense, but not really, right? Like there's always going to be gaps when you don't fully assess and evaluate, what are the capabilities within our organization? What are these different products, really bringing to the table? It's extremely challenging. Luckily, there's a little bit more competition, honestly, in the HR technology space than there is from like which email provider am I going to use, Microsoft or Google? A little bit more. We got SAP, we got Oracle, we got Workday, we got UKG, like a little bit more out there. In ATS front, we also have a lot of new emerging technology in the space. But it really does come down to there are some powerhouses that have influence and connections and massive sales teams. I can't remember the exact number, but I remember reading somewhere about how like the sales budgets for some of these SaaS companies far, far, far outweigh their product development budgets. They spend a lot more money trying to sell you their product than they do trying to enhance their product. And, that's the name of the game, right? It's you got to get out there. You got to get ahead. I don't blame them. That's how the game is played, and that's how you make money. But you need to be aware of that. And this is what I talk about, kind of this alignment on purpose and this understanding of what other people's motivations are. Because quite often, even the most senior of leaders fall into that trap of, oh, well, like this sounds amazing. And it's like, sir, you've been in this space for 30 years. You've done similar things of selling and upselling. And how are you falling for this as an expert on doing it yourself? And it still happens where you have these senior leaders who fall into those traps. And then you also have them not always checking with, how do people like our existing technology? What do they like about our existing technology? A lot of that information really isn't captured. And when you try to capture it after the fact, you they run into some roadblocks. Like the people who really like the previous technology and the reasons they liked it might be hard to extract from them when they quit the company because you picked a new technology. So that's part one, right? It's just, you have to understand the motivations. You have to understand the purpose. You really need to pull and get a pulse of your organization and the people who are not only going to be administering these systems like you and I, but also the people who are going to be using them. Oftentimes one of the most neglected groups. I have been on implementations for ATSs where recruiters have not been consulted until UAT. Get to user acceptance testing. Hey guys, we have a new ATS. Come try it out. Didn't consider talking to them sooner when you were trying to figure out your processes, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to build these different modules. And you wonder why they're like not following the click path that you were expecting. Like why they're not using the tracking steps that you developed. Why they're not clicking through and sending email templates the way you expected them to. Like what's wrong with them? That's often a line that you see in this space. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with them. You just didn't ask them what they wanted. You gave them a boomerang and a steak and were like, eat. And they were like, I have a fork over here. And like, you're like, why aren't they using the boomerang? I spent so much time developing that boomerang. There's all these different spaces where it's like, you really need to understand your users and you really need to understand those experiences. And if you don't align on what are people's objectives here, how are people going to use this tool? What is their use going to result in from a business perspective, from an efficiency perspective? If you don't consider those things, you try to sort of force fit them into it while you're working, you're not going to have a successful implementation.
And I find this is often the case when IT takes a lead on implementing HR software and the actual people using the software is sort of an afterthought. I come from nonprofit and education prior to starting this business. And so including stakeholders was just, you had to, right? It simply was baked into the model that everybody has a voice. And it wasn't until I switched to the private sector where I started to see all these examples of like, nope, people are just making decisions and hope you like it, right? But absolutely, in terms of like user adoption, like you need to have people at the table who are actually going to be using this. And you can't like turn over too much decision making to them. Like there's different levels of inclusivity in terms of making major decisions about how a system is run. But at the end of the day, if the end user had no voice in how the system is set up, your adoption rates are going to be abysmal.
100%.
Yeah. I think a lot also with the vendor selection questions, part of the reason why I added that feature to find other users in SAI, right? So my theory is that if we elevate the voice of the system administrator specifically, right, in that conversation, I get it. I've had my own small business version of that type of like decision making where I'm not actually including the people who are going to use it because I only have so much time. Only so many minutes in the day. I'm in a rush. I'm in a hurry. And I see how I have been susceptible to marketing, right? Like I tried Monday.com. It's purely because I'd seen so many ads in New York City subway for Monday.com. And it turned out I did not like it at all, but I needed a CRM, right? I was doing sales among many other things. I needed a CRM. I tried it and eventually abandoned it and moved to Pipedrive. But all of my own vendor selection experiences, successes and failures, I feel like a good microcosm of what businesses go through. And as a business leader, like you are being, when you let the internet know that you're ready to buy a $200,000 piece of software, you are just going to get besieged by so much attention. The internet knows people. I don't think people understand search intent marketing, right? So you can use a tool like ZoomInfo, and ZoomInfo will tell the user what software you're thinking about buying, right? You're thinking about buying Workday, ZoomInfo knows, right? And you're going to hear from folks who can help you implement Workday, right? And then we actually had a situation where there was a customer who's thinking about using iCIMS, and we reached out to them, and they were really taken aback, right? And actually, this is at a company that's very I won't name the company obviously, but it's a tech company, and I was surprised that they were surprised, but they were surprised and taken aback that we knew that they were thinking about implementing iCIMS, right? We had to explain like this is how this marketing software works, right? There's cookies everywhere. The internet is just full of them, right? Next question. You have a unique blend of expertise in areas like AI, automation, user experience design, and HR processes. How do you think these different domains intersect and influence each other when it comes to building effective HR technology?
We live in an increasingly digital world, right? And Understanding how technology can serve us is really critical. And, particularly in the space of UX design, right? It's heavily neglected in the B2B space, period. Even ignoring HR, it took a very long time for say one of the things that has made Salesforce and even like HubSpot to some degree really stand out has been their sort of renewed focus on user experience, really make it pleasant for sales employees. You haven't seen that same level of investment and, thought in the HR technology space. And for me, these all they fit together nicely anyway, because HR processes, right, are born of necessity in a lot of spaces, right? They come up because we need to solve a problem from a business perspective, and they're oftentimes MacGyvered together. It's literally just duct tape, right? And that's not great. Like, okay, now that you have the duct tape solution in place and you're meeting some of the requirements, well, how can we do it a little bit better? And that's where I think, things like automation, AI, and a focus on human computer interaction and user experience design add a tremendous amount of value, right? Amazon has shown that if a transaction on their site takes, more than I think a billionth of a second,
Wow.
they lose billions of dollars a year for those billionth of a second
Wow.
delays in clicks. I deal with, and you deal with probably systems that have much longer than a billionth of a second delay. And while we don't necessarily see the immediate billions of dollars in losses there, we do see people not track things because, it took too long. I did it over here. We do see people running their entire CRMs out of Google Sheets because, their candidate relationship management systems out of Google Sheets because Google Sheets is faster. It's not really faster, but the illusion of I can throw stuff in here and it will instantly respond to me is there. So you have these unique challenges that are really difficult to solve because on top of everything else, even if some of the products may solve them themselves, if iSIMS or Avature, or Workday or Bullhorn or Greenhouse, if they do these things a little bit quicker and a little bit better, you still have to rely on an entire additional layer of business processes at the company that has the tool. You have to rely on the system administrators and the decisions made around how they implemented their version of the application, the steps that they put in there. There's a lot of converging factors. And I think that, when you consider the value that things like automation and potentially generative artificial intelligence can bring to a space that has been very disorganized, very scattered when it comes to the focus of which problems they should be solving and what the implications of those problems are at a higher level, right? Like, let's fix interviewing. Every company's trying to fix interviewing. Do any of them know what they're actually doing? I haven't found one yet. What are we actually trying to solve here? And how can we apply these things conceptually, right? Like you see HireVue, what was it, like a few years ago, tried to add AI to read people's micro expressions and things like that. You should have been able to see from light years away that was going to result in massive lawsuits. You should have been able to see the bias even outside of that context for the fact that different people, particularly people in poorer communities, have poor bandwidth and are going to not necessarily represent themselves well on camera because there's going to be glitches in the Wi-Fi and how they're presenting themselves. So it was not a great idea. So it's like you need to understand these broader processes. You need to understand these broader implications and how you can kind of bring all of that together to build out a meaningful interview experience that helps you assess while also building your employer brand, while also expediting how quickly you can hire someone who's going to be effective in their role.
You touched on this, something you said. I'm wondering what you think about how to preserve institutional knowledge with this. So a lot of information is in the brains of the system administrators who are running the software, right? What are your thoughts on preserving institutional knowledge for when that position turns over?
I think it's a space where AI could be very helpful. I actually had a really amusing conversation this morning with a friend of mine from LinkedIn, Ben O'Mahony, who runs a company called Jobs ASI, and I was talking to him about how one of the biggest strategic advantages in the SaaS space for HR technology is that most companies, their documentation is terrible.
Yeah.
That means it's extremely difficult to copy their product because even they don't know how they built their product. So that same concept of the SaaS products also applies in-house with a lot of these HR technology teams, these administrators. They're so busy solving problems, putting their finger on the hole to avoid the ship from sinking. They don't document a lot of what they do, and they build a lot of knowledge, and it picks up in their brain. And the main answer to your question of, how do you improve that is you distribute that knowledge as best you can, and you record that knowledge. Like you have some degree of documentation. You ideally have backups if you can. Like, it's not unheard of and it's not weird to go out to consulting firms to staff augment. Like, that is reasonable. And given the amount of resources available, it's a wise investment in a lot of cases. But at the same time, you need to make sure that knowledge is not in one space. Like, it cannot be in that one person's head, because even if that person is highly loyal to your company, the world works in mysterious ways. Lots of things can happen. You may not have that person forever. And it's a space that companies could struggle with. And it's a space where I hope to see more and more work with generative AI and automation of freeing up time to make documenting easier. That's one angle, because if documenting stays as challenging as it is right now, it doesn't matter if you free up my time for everything else. I'm still not going to want to document. I'm just going to go for a walk instead. Like, we need to make documenting easier. We need to prioritize it a little bit better. And we need to make the way we kind of distribute information and knowledge simpler, so that people, because I think it's not even just about maintaining systems better. It's about communicating how these systems work in a way that lay people or non-technical users can understand. So they can really understand the capabilities of these systems, because not only does that make them better users, more willing to adopt the technology, it also means you're going to get richer feedback from them. They're going to frame their feedback around, hey, I had a really unpleasant time clicking this specific sequence of clicks in the system, and based on all the stuff you told me about how we could do this, what if we switch this around in the workflow? Whoa, now I'm crowdsourcing ideas about ways to maybe administer my system more effectively, because my employee population understands the configuration a little bit better.
I have a not so great memory, and I'm also really obsessive about storing information, in part as a reaction to not having a great memory. So when I left my full-time job to start IRD, I left behind a 100 plus page document that outlined every last thing that I had configured in iSIMS. And unfortunately, nobody could really make sense of it. Right. And so we ended up coming back and offering support to that company to help them use the documentation that I created and properly administer the system. Right. And that was not a great outcome for them. Right. Even though I had documented everything. That's my point. But this was also before AI was in popular usage. Right. So I am imagining that taking a document like that and other inputs, we could create something like a chatbot that is like a system administrator copilot, or whatever you want to call it, that processes all that information and then delivers it to somebody in a way they can actually understand. So they can just ask a question about the ADP integration and get a plain English answer, as opposed to having to pour through all of the things that Alex obsessively documented over months.
I was going to say, you could literally even call it the ghost of Alex, right? And then you could use Dolly or Midjourney to create this little cute little ghost robot version of Alex, that talks to you.
Oh, there you go. That's the name of this product.
But no, I 100% agree. I had a similar experience, particularly when I left Viacom CBS, now Paramount. Lucky for them, when I left, we had left iSIMS. So I had been an iSIMS administrator there for nearly 7 years. And then I led an SAP SuccessFactors implementation there, which checks a lot of the boxes of things we've talked about in terms of love all the people there. And we did an incredible job with the hand that we were dealt. And I think what we did and how we implemented the tool in a way that had never been done before, going first with recruiting. We went with RCM and RMK, the recruiting modules. We went with that before we went with the HCM module, which was unheard of. And we did it in about 6-8 months. It was crazy. The velocity and the way everyone came together and the way we worked as a team. I have so much respect for everyone who worked on the project and the outcome that we were able to drive. But at the same time, it was one of those scenarios where, for example, not that I would have or should have individually had the power to do this, I wasn't really consulted on the decision to go to SAP SuccessFactors and to abandon iSIMS on the Viacom side and abandon Avature on the CBS side. And again, how could it have run a little bit smoother? Maybe. There's a lot I didn't know then, and there's still a lot I'm still learning as I go on my career journey. But in the process, I got thrown into this new system. I ended up being the point of contact and kind of the main knowledge worker in this space, and ended up being the person who built out this entire recruitment tool. And then I got a really lucrative offer to work in tech, and I could not turn it down. And as much as I loved the cherished memories, and as much as I had exceeded the average millennial lifespan at a company by nearly 6 years at Viacom, I felt it was the right time to move on. And it definitely stung. I know it stung, and I did my best to continue to try to communicate these things, but they got stuck in a lot of spaces. I'm still in very close touch with the person who took over for me, and who became the administrator there. And she would message me. She's like, we cannot figure out how you built this diversity dashboard, so we're just going to sunset it. And like, that's not a great experience. We're just going to sunset this highly effective,
Wow.
diversity dashboard because we
Wow.
don't know how it works. And we changed some other things that broke it. We can't figure out how to fix it. SAP won't help us. Bye dashboard. Like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah. That hurts my heart. Yeah, because I know how much time and effort went into that. I have some, I've done similar things, and like it's a thing. It worked. It was, yeah. Well, let's actually pivot in that direction. So, you mentioned a passion for using technology for DEI. Do you have some examples of how HR tech can move the needle on DEI goals?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, right, I was the head of an employee resource group at Viacom CBS, now Paramount. We had many names. We were first called Thursday Think, which is a story for a separate podcast. And then we rebranded as Rise. But I ultimately, through that channel, reported up to Marva Smalls, who's the chief inclusion officer, global head of inclusion at Paramount. And she had an expression, what gets measured gets done. And I think it's to some degree an oversimplification, but that might just be the poet in me who uses too many words sometimes. But I do think it's a relevant point, right? You do need to measure things and you need to understand what you're measuring. And that's where, I think HR technology can help largely with DEI, right? It's capturing this valuable information and measuring it in effective ways and working cross-sectional or cross-functional stakeholders to better evaluate, right? What is the health of our organization? What is the health in these different spaces? I just listened to a podcast with Adam Weber called HR Superstars, and he interviewed Donald Knight, who's the chief people officer at Greenhouse. Donald said, diversity of thought drives creativity. Creativity drives innovation. Innovation drives revenue. Revenue drives profit, right? Pretty simple, but diversity is the leading thing there, right? Hiring for diversity of perspective, right? Beyond just certain, it's never about just one demographic trait. It's the other thing a lot of these companies fall into the trap of. I've worked with companies who are like, we need at least one female on every interview slate. And I'm like, that's a bold initiative. And women are an underrepresented group in a lot of spaces, but they're not underrepresented in every space. So for example, an area where this would not have helped it, two of the previous companies I worked at were sales, where about 80% of the sales population were white women. So trying to get more white women in the funnel was not contributing to diversity. And again, that's if you oversimplify and solely focus on the fact that they were white women and you don't look at other things like perspectives. But doing an analysis at one organization I worked at, we discovered that something like 30% of the sales department had all been members of the same Penn State sorority. That's not necessarily an effective way of getting people who are thinking differently, who are representing the people you're trying to sell to. You're likely selling to diverse audiences from a sales perspective. And these are the things where you need to build out these broader perspectives of what are we looking to accomplish, right? There may be a problem if the BET salespeople are mostly white women, when your market and your audience are literally people of color. That's the objective and the fundamental goal of the business. This is something that we actually pulled out through some early research when I was working at Viacom CBS in the early days of people analytics. And we worked to diversify those teams because it didn't make sense. It literally didn't make sense from a business perspective of we don't have the right people representing these groups that we're literally trying to sell to. And there's so many other ways you can kind of like peel that back, but it's about having these conversations and thinking about what we're measuring. It's not just we need more people of X demographic because that will make us more diverse. It's we need more people of X demographic because here is the value they are going to add. Here are the ways they are going to challenge our traditional ways of thinking, right? That is kind of how we need to do that. And we need to start being able to tie these things so that when we look into diversity of hiring, diversity around, retention rates, diversity around attrition rates, how does that actually funnel into our bottom line? We need to start to close some of those gaps. There may be some other easier HR metrics to focus on tying to finance and EBITDA. But if we can actually start looking at how, as Donald said, right, like how diversity drives profit, we can start to really, really get a stronger sense. And we can certainly use HR tech to leverage that through things like pulse surveys, right? Through asking people in clear and understanding ways where, that make them more willing and accommodating to provide their information anonymously, right? Because when they don't know what we're using their information for, and we ask them what their sexual orientation is, right? We may just get a lot of, I choose not to disclose. And worse, we may get people who lie because they don't want to disclose their queer identity because they don't want to be put in a bucket for that reason. When realistically, you're using that data to craft better experiences for your employee population. And you need to lead with transparency when you do these surveys, right? You need to be like, we're collecting this information so we can better cater to our employee population. We're collecting this information to identify spaces where we may not be adequately, moving the needle. We may not be adequately representing people who are an actual part of our population, like the demographic of our customer base, the demographic of the country we're based in. You need data to do that. And the simplest way to accumulate that data is through your HR technology platforms.
Who's doing a great job of that?
Might have to get back to you on that. I think there are companies that are trying to move the needle in that space, and I've heard some really, really great conversations in the space at some of the HR analytics meetups I've gone to, and I know that there are a number of HR analytics platforms out there, like One Model, that are trying to do this. They focus around these DEI metrics, but in terms of organizations that are really moving the needle, it's hard to say. Like I know, there's some great thought leaders that have come out of the Big Four, right? Like there are some people coming out of the accounting firms who they literally try to move the needle in a lot of these spaces, whether that's Deloitte, KPMG, EY. They try to test these products and bring things to market. There's some interesting research from those spaces that shows the value of these things add, even the McKinseys and the Accentures of the world. And again, Paramount was trying. I think that they were doing a much better job than a lot of other companies because they were trying.
Yeah.
But I still think that there's a long way to go.
And what were the dashboard that you referenced earlier, what were you most proud of in that project?
Sure. So the objective was to satisfy multiple stakeholders, right? It was a challenging task because we wanted to share diversity information. We wanted to share ethnicity information, gender information on applicants at certain stages to meet what was not a perfect proxy, but was an attempt to encourage diversity around diverse slates. But we wanted to do it in a way where you could not tell who was who. Because when you can tell who is who, you're overcompensating for unconscious bias. You may start to neglect people who are actually qualified because you're so focused on hitting XYZ quota. And the goal with this dashboard was that it was more of an outcome-oriented thing. Are the actions you're taking actually moving the needle? Are the things you're doing unconsciously in the way that you're recruiting, making sure that we're getting fair assessments and we're not overlooking talented people because of their ethnicity? Not we're trying to include more people because of their ethnicity regardless of their talent. That's not the point. The point is, are we not neglecting people? And that was the way this dashboard kind of worked. It was designed in such a way where you can kind of check after the fact, after you had kind of gone through from establishing an interview slate. How does this look? How do we look? How did I do? Or wow, in the process, we neglected a number of applicants of color who were probably qualified. And this dashboard kind of shows me that we neglected those people. What can we do about that? And how can we handle that in real time? And it wasn't done necessarily in a step where we were done hiring. So there was still an opportunity to potentially interview these people, right? To consider, okay, did we miss the ball here? Can I kind of see through the group who some of the people are, regardless of ethnicity, even though I now have this as an indicator, who were some of the people that were really qualified that I just overlooked because I saw their name or I saw the school they went to. And I was like, Morehouse isn't MIT. Like where are the spaces where I kind of maybe had those reactions and how can I address those biases in myself? And that was kind of the intention of that dashboard. Am I maybe embellishing the qualities I hoped people took from it a little bit in this statement? Yeah. But like there were attempts to do that. And there was, I think, a lot of value. It took a lot of work to get this data, as you know, in these different systems, to mask this information, to deliver an actual functional experience in an ATS where this dashboard was more or less accessible through the same panels where you're moving candidates around. And you were able to use this information to make informed decisions, to make future-oriented decisions around how can I hire better next time, right? If, I got stuff. Was it me? Was it my own bias? Was it, all of these people who were diverse, who didn't mix data around, they were all rejected by the hiring manager. Is there a coaching opportunity there?
Let's talk a little bit about candidate experience. I'm reading a book right now by Kevin Grossman called Candidate Experience, and it's fantastic. And I was talking to him the other day because he's going to be a guest on this podcast. And in preparation for that, I'm reading his book. One of the concepts that he shared with me on the call was the idea of closure. And it just immediately captured something that I have felt and tried to express in many different ways in a single word: closure. That's all people want. They just want closure. They want to know that they've been heard, whether they got the job or didn't, right? Some sort of like closing the chapter of this particular engagement. And one thing that's interesting, beginning of the book, Jerry Christman is talking about, he asked two different groups, when does a person become a candidate, right? And it's even funny that we need to ask that question because candidates are very clear when they become a candidate, but recruiters and sourcers are sort of like hemming and hawing. It's like, well, maybe when they went to the career site, maybe when they applied, maybe when they heard back, maybe the interview their actual candidate. And what Jerry Christman says in the foreword is that the minute you apply for a job, you're a candidate. In the candidate's mind, you're a candidate, right? And I think about this from a system administrator perspective. We have the ability with good ATS to provide bulk closure at scale, right? But it has to be done well. And I think we've all had the experience of getting emails from employers where we hadn't even, I've gotten some from jobs I never applied to. I've gotten some that were just like, thanks for interviewing with us when never, I hear all sorts of crazy stories about the failed attempts at closure, right? So what is your experience with that? What are your thoughts on closing the loop with candidates?
It's a great point, and it's a highly contentious point. It's one of the missing ingredients for sure. There's a tremendous lack of closure. I wish, I had the statistics in front of me, and I wish companies would be more transparent about this, but there are hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of applicants in ATSs that literally go unrejected, that fall into these thoughtless pipelines too. Like, that there's so many terrible experiences where people literally like, oh, whoops, we accidentally dropped you into a drip campaign after we ghosted you. Like, you should come apply to our company. Well, the last 3 times I applied to your company, I never heard back. Like, what? Exactly. And now you're sending me emails asking me to apply when you couldn't even send me an email that I'm no longer under consideration. Like, it's crazy. One of the new things I've noticed is, I'll apply to a job, I'll get instantly rejected. Then I'll see these jobs getting reposted, and it's just so funny. I'm like, oh, you can't find anybody. Oh, you keep automatically rejecting everyone. I wonder why you're struggling to find people. I wonder. It's crazy. Yeah. And 100%. Like, I think closure is a challenging piece, but I think the organizations aren't really equipped for it. And I don't have a magical answer to it, but I think there are a number of incremental steps organizations can take. But organizations would love, from the conversations I've had, there are a lot of HR leaders, they would love to give personalized feedback to why you were rejected. Yeah. But half the time, they don't have time. That's one element. They actually can't explain themselves, which is probably the bigger problem. They literally can't explain. We rejected you because you were the 7th person to apply, and the first 6 people, they were decent enough, and we moved along. But it's hard to answer those questions. And I think too back to this Deloitte study from 2017, and it's like this is one of the under-researched and under-metriced spaces is candidate experience. There was a study they did with this media company where they discovered that rejected candidates were kind of not given reasons and had unpleasant experiences applying to this company. Those rejected candidates resulted in a 6% decrease in customers. Like the 6% of them disconnected their service.
Wow. Yeah.
And it resulted in $5 million in lost revenue.
Wow, I love that.
$5 million in lost revenue from bad candidate experiences. We need more research like that because this is just the one company that decided to focus on. Like, how many companies that probably have worse numbers that we're just not measuring, that we just don't realize that you are delivering such terrible candidate experiences? People are literally disconnecting your service. I won't get too into it, but I've literally done that myself. I had a place that, I applied to a while back before I was in my current role, when things were a little tumultuous at Twitter. And I had great interviews. I had great experiences. I literally met with the hiring manager and they ghosted me. And the service that I had from that company, I canceled. It took me about a year. But a year later, I was so fed up. It'd been a year. I hadn't heard anything back. I tried reaching out on LinkedIn a couple times, just being like, hey, it's cool if you found someone more qualified. To your point, no closure. I canceled my service with them. And 100% transparency, I canceled that service because of that poor experience. Oh.
It's one small way we can take our power back, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. So what about interview feedback? Because I hear this a lot. I have a friend who has been applying for jobs for quite some time now. And the most painful thing for him is that he has no idea why he didn't get the job. And I know from the company's perspective, so the recruiter may have a list of disposition statuses that are more precise, but the recruiters are always going to choose the most bland and neutral one to mitigate risk, right? I don't want to say anything too targeted that, so usually the feedback is just generic and useless. Have you seen any practices that give candidates good, actionable feedback in a way that does not expose the company to any kind of risk? I don't have a solution for that.
We've come full circle from the very beginning of this conversation, which is that you have to think about purpose when it comes to why a lot of these processes are in place. And a lot of the reasons, for handling why we rejected someone or why we dispositioned someone, a lot of those are for audits. And exactly, we want to keep things as generic as we can, but specific to what the auditors expect to see. Don't want to get that granular because we fear it opens us up to litigation. I don't have an answer. Maybe it's something, you and I, we need to talk to Claude and ChatGPT about and really flesh out. Maybe we'll find a solution. There are definitely startup companies out there that I've talked to who are trying to do things in the space. We're trying to make interview feedback more transparent, like Equitas, but it's not easy because you have the challenge of people are always going to, this is high stakes, this is high emotion.
Yeah.
Even when you actually give someone very honest feedback, very constructive feedback, if they take it the wrong way and they have enough money and they hire a lawyer, they can make your life hell, even if you're going to ultimately win. And no company wants to open that door. And unfortunately, that's the byproduct of American culture, which is why I think you're seeing a lot of the inroads being made in Europe, where even though consumers are highly protected, there's not as much civil litigation. And as a result, I think we're starting to see it there. And maybe if there's some success in Europe, we'll start to see it trickle over into the US, where you are starting to see products that make interview feedback easier because they're making it easier. Great visitor. That candidate is instantly hired. But they're making it easier to handle feedback in the first place, right? Like one of the biggest gaps, the first gap that needs to be closed is make it easier for me to have conversations and interviews with some recording, right? Like, some AI tools that take my notes for me, give me feedback. I can parse through that and be like, okay, this is what I said. This is what they said. Thinking about their answers, thinking about the context a little bit more. These are the things I thought they were really strong with, and these are the things I didn't think they were all that strong with. And that gives me an advantage to write more authentic feedback just from an internal perspective. And now with those tools at my disposal further, I can now take that and maybe use that to, you talked about how hard business writing is. I can distill that and make it easier to write personalized feedback and give people responses that are simple enough, that's going to start getting us there, right? It's going to be simple enough. Unfortunately, if we give too much detail, people are going to get stuck on certain words. If we do not enough detail, people are going to be like, this is inauthentic garbage. So there's got to be this really, really neat sweet spot where it's like, it's just enough feedback. I understand. I respect that. And it needs to be somehow constructive and action oriented, which is really hard. Because it's like, what if I just say, well, Alex, your background in construction really just is not going to work for this machine learning engineering role. I'm sorry. What if you're offended by that? I don't know. How do I frame this in context where there are people who are radically underqualified or legitimately unqualified who apply for roles? How do you reject people who are overqualified? I had a friend who recently got a notice from a company that said, we believe you have too many years of experience for this role. And it's just like, what does that even mean?
Wow.
You're too talented.
That means ageism. That's all that means. Wow. That means we want to pay somebody less than what we know you want. Or what we suspect you want.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, Adam. Before we end, I want to do something called the lightning round. I did not come up with this idea. You probably heard this before. Maybe you've even done it yourself. But I'm going to present you with a couple of pairs of things, and you tell me what you prefer. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. In person, remote, or hybrid?
Hybrid.
Yeah, me too. Apple or Microsoft?
Microsoft.
Really? Have you ever used Apple products?
At Twitter. And I like to customize things. So like we can go down this rabbit hole, but I like to configure things. I like to automate things. Apple's getting better in those spaces, but Apple's one of those, like, you get it as it is and you work with it as it is. And I'm not someone who hates on Apple. Most of my friends use iPhones. I always get flack for being the green bubble. But I'm just, I've been a Microsoft and an Android guy.
Well, I got my first computer 93, 94, somewhere around there. It was a 386DX and I learned MS-DOS. I bought it with money that I made working at Burger King, and I loved customizing it. And I've done some programming, nothing super serious, but like the ability to get under the hood and customize things really spoke to me. And I get, but then sometimes my friends who use Apple products, I look at the UI and it's just so incredible, right? It's just absolutely, it's such a beautiful experience. But yeah, I don't know. I had a moment where I needed a new computer about a month ago, and I was kind of on the fence. I actually went and demoed the Apple Vision Pro, and I was so impressed. It was just, have you tried this yet?
I haven't yet. I've heard people who tried it. I've listened to a few podcasts of people trying it, which is always fun.
Yeah.
There was even a prank on one of them where this guy walked, like, I don't know if you listen to the podcast Hard Fork, but one of them came in with ski goggles that looked like the Vision Pro, and he was pretending he had the Vision Pro, but it was like $10 ski goggles.
I'm completely immersed in reality. It's amazing. Wow. All right. Chrome, Edge, or Firefox, or something else?
Chrome.
Why?
I honestly, this is one of those things where it's been sticky for me.
Yeah.
I have been very tempted, and I think you can use it in conjunction because I've had conversations with a few people. Been very tempted to switch to Arc and play around with the Arc browser, which is it's a browser that has the like AI integrations. Like you can literally you'll have like ChatGPT or Claude follow you around, and you can kind of use it integrated with the browser experience.
Really?
But I have all of my extensions, all of my bookmarks in Chrome. I do think Edge is starting to catch up. I do think, Firefox, unfortunately, has been just like largely neglected. I think there are other browsers of interest out there. I occasionally use Tor, but for the most part, it's all Chrome.
Isn't the government allowed to spy on you without any sort of restrictions if you have Tor installed on your computer? I remember reading this somewhere on the internet once.
Maybe. I mean, if they want to spy on me, they can check out my
right,
cat.
Exactly.
Like, if they want to send some extra cat food too, and she's running low, I love that. CIA, if you're listening.
We'll include your mailing address in the show notes, although they have that. All right, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini?
Multiple. Like I use ChatGPT the most just because I find it to be the most convenient. I built my own GPTs, things like that. I've been trying to use Claude a little bit more because it's so good at the creative writing aspect. It's so good at writing those personalized messages and being persuasive. ChatGPT, on the other hand, is really good at like summarizing information, digesting information. And Gemini, I'm trying to get in the habit of using a little bit more because of its larger context window. So I'm trying to use it more for if I have something really large, my own notes, for example. Like I took an MIT course on human-computer interaction, and I have like 380 pages of notes. I tried to throw that thing into ChatGPT, and I tried to give it the PDF, and I was trying to ask questions, and it got all confused. Gemini did a much better job of I could ask it questions about like different heuristics and different theories and different laws and different use cases and examples. And it was super, super effective at, being like, yeah, on page 286, this is mentioned.
Interesting. Cool. Before we wrap up for today, a couple more questions. How do you organize information to stay productive at work? What are your favorite productivity tools?
It's another space that I'm still trying to improve in. I am a pretty big fan of Slack. I like to use Slack to organize information. I think that for a lot of people, it's challenging, but if you use it the right way, if you use bookmarks and pins, if you set reminders, I send messages to myself. I even group messages in threads. I'll create dedicated channels for things, or dedicated group chats. It can be highly effective, not explicitly for my actual work at like recruiting advisors, but for my own personal work for LinkedIn, the social media work I'm doing. I'm using Notion a lot. So I'm using Notion. I literally have been using Notion as like my social media planner. Like I've broken out kind of like, different content ideas. I will literally I'll do prompts in ChatGPT, and then I'll dump them in there to come back to them if I don't think they're refined enough. And I'll kind of group things in there. I've been trying to track reading logs in there. Well, for literal books, because I buy too many books and I don't read them. So for the books that I'm trying to read through, as well as articles, like Notion has a pretty cool browser plugin on Chrome, where you see an article, like I'll click something on LinkedIn and I don't have the time to read it right now. I can add it to my to-do list or to my reading list. And then on top of that, I actually rely on Alexa. I know she's been highly neglected, and I shouldn't say her name. Um, but I've relied on her quite a bit for reminders, and I actually find it really helpful. Like if I, it's louder, and
Yeah.
whether it's Google Home or Alexa or those other devices, it's just louder and more effective than a pop-up notification. I'm immune to all of those, but when something shouts at me, you have a meeting in 5 minutes, I listen.
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan of Slack, and we use Notion over here too. I've started using the AI feature in Notion where if you hit spacebar and then start typing. Have you used this yet?
I haven't though.
It's really
Okay,
good. It's really good, and it comes up with great stuff. Okay, so podcasts. I know you're a podcast fan. What are your favorite podcasts?
It's hard. There's a lot. I think the ones that I've been listening to the most, definitely Hard Fork. Highly recommend it if you're interested in kind of all things tech, right? It's Kevin Reese from the New York Times and Casey Newton from Platformer. They have amazing guests. It's my go-to. I was turned on to it actually by one of my current colleagues, Carolyn Bursch, who was also one of my former colleagues. We worked together at Paramount, and then we worked together at Recruiting Advisors. The Hard Fork is a good one. From the HR space, I'm a big fan of Directionally Correct with Cole Napper and Scott Hines. They cover a lot of people analytics topics, and they have some really fun segments. If you're ever looking for inspiration to some future segments in your own podcast, Alex, I recommend giving them a listen. HR Data Labs with David Turetsky, another good one, kind of in that data space. And then trying to think, there's one other one that I'm a big fan of in the AI space is called the AI Breakdown. And of course, because we exist in 2024 and everyone's obsessed with AI, there are 2 podcasts called the AI Breakdown. So this one specifically is the AI Breakdown, Daily Artificial Intelligence News and Discussions from Nathaniel L. Whittemore, or NLW. I will qualify it with, he is very much pro AI. And like, not that things should be explicitly pro or con AI. He is very much in kind of like, I don't know, he'd call himself an accelerationist. He's in that camp. So you have to listen to it with a healthy dose of skepticism and weigh it against some other things. But he's really great at keeping you apprised with, if ChatGPT dropped something 5 minutes ago, he'll report on it.
Got it. You're on LinkedIn a lot. Whose content do you actually enjoy on LinkedIn?
Also a good question. I am a big fan of a number of different people in the, emerging HR tech space. So Ben O'Mahony, who I mentioned earlier, Michael Blackley from Equitas. Lee Harding does a lot of stuff in the recruiting space. I'm also a fan of people like Amanda Halley and Teresa Fesenstein, who are both amazing women doing work in the space of AI for HR. Desiree Goldie is another great one who's doing culture work and HR work and touching on AI here and there. Lydia Wu is an amazing person from an HR admin perspective and like a talent operations and HR operations perspective. She's kind of a big go-to there. Tim Whitley, another really good one. He works over at Oklahoma State University, and he has all sorts of great tips on Excel and SQL and, how to use analytics and how to manage your HR databases. And those are just a few.
Adam, where can people learn more about you and your work?
Right now, LinkedIn. Maybe more stuff coming soon. Recruiting Advisors does have my bio on the website. I don't know if it's as sexy as how you introduced me today. But that's there. But LinkedIn is the best place to find me. As you said, I'm super active there. I'm always looking to connect and have conversations. I think I have 3 or 4 just informal connects with people across different spectrums. I met an amazing recent grad named Catherine McMillan, who's excited about the AI space just through my activity on LinkedIn. And she's got these amazing ideas and she's trying to do disruptive stuff. And it's so cool to talk to people like her and then to also talk to people who have a lot more experience and rigor and people who are skeptical of these things. I love to have conversations. I love to be challenged. So,
Adam, this has been truly a pleasure and super informative and enlightening. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll talk to you soon. I'm a big fan of your stuff on LinkedIn too, so I will be commenting away and looking forward to this continued conversation. So thank you so much for joining today.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Alex. So good to see you.
Likewise. If you'd like to connect with other HR technologists, we have an online learning community called System Admin Insights, where you can network and grow in your profession with other HR techies based on the software they've used, the industries they've worked in, company size, and so much more. Our mission is to elevate the role of the HR system administrator and help you stay ahead of the curve in the ever-changing world of HR technology. Head on over to systemadmininsights.com for more information. Also, if you've enjoyed today's episode, you can leave us a review at ratethispodcast.com/SAI. That's it for today. Thanks again for listening. I hope your week is filled with joy, learning, and community. Bye for now. By the way, we have Adam to thank for our theme song for this show. The story behind this is I had created a theme song using Claude for the lyrics and Suno.ai. The version that I had created was a country version, and I love country music, and I loved the song. I still love it, but I was pretty much the only one who loved it. So I sent Adam a version of the song, and he sent me back a remixed version using the lyrics from the version that I'd created, and I just thought it was so great that it needed to be the theme for this show. The way that he did it is an interesting study in AI literacy. With Suno.ai, you're not allowed to enter in an artist's name or band's name. So what he did was he asked ChatGPT to describe the music of Linkin Park and then took that description and put that in Suno.ai with the lyrics that I had generated with Claude, and the theme song in its current version is what came out. So using AI to create a prompt for another AI is one of those digital literacy skills that are really key to understanding how to work with this emerging technology. I wanted to share that story with you. And here for your listening pleasure is the full song created by me, Adam, Claude, and Suno.ai. Enjoy.
Where people take the line. There's a podcast shining bright with stories from the inside. System Admin Insights, that's the name of our show. Meeting the unsung heroes who make HR technology go. We make software work for companies all around. System Admin Insights, stories can be found. HR technologists, masters of our trade. With automation and analytics, we got it made. For strategy and troubleshooting, we'll do it all. Keeping tech running smooth, answering each and every call. We bridge the gap between you and that machine. HR tech wizards working the line.